Alright then, another poor showing, but time to reflect, I guess, on it. Hello. Going to be going over what I thought about Iowa's blowout loss at Iowa State Thursday night. Obviously not a very good showing for Iowa. The Clones completely controlled the game. They controlled the pace. They controlled the physicality. They really got Iowa sped up. Um, Iowa was just trying to force a whole lot going against them. Because Iowa State's half-court defense is so good, Iowa was trying way too hard at various points in time in this game to take shots during the shot clock or really drive early in the clock. But Iowa State did a good job getting back, and they took a number of charges that way. They forced some poor shots from Iowa, from a number of different players. Just completely controlled us and didn't allow us to get. They made us very uncomfortable offensively. If you watch the game, you'll see numerous fumbling of passes, just numerous passes that are just off target in general. Players miss shots that maybe you'd expect them to make, but because Iowa State had us so rattled, which is a credit to them, we missed them. And that's just going over Iowa's offensive issues. Iowa's defensive issues are well documented. The physicality of Iowa State really bothered us. And it goes back to what I've said earlier in one of my videos. Iowa has a real lack of physicality at the 3 and 4 positions. In theory, maybe someone like Laji Dembele, who often plays power forward for us, would provide that physicality, but I still think he's learning how to best use his physicality, and he's still learning just in general as a freshman. And the other 3 players who consistently play those positions, Price, Peyton, Pat, just don't bring that athleticism or physicality to this game. And I thought maybe going into this game, Iowa's ability to shoot from those positions would be hard for Iowa State to guard those guys at times, which in fairness I think you saw at times, but you really saw on the other end that Iowa State's physicality with Rob Jones and Trey King just really overwhelmed Iowa inside. Peyton had a good shooting day. He showed his versatility again, his shot-making ability to hit contested shots, hit shots coming off of screens, even dribble and take a ball screen, hit a three-point shot to his left. But man, he was really targeted defensively in this game. Not a very good defensive game from him at all. But at the same time, it's like really no one had a good defensive game. But Iowa's defense at the 3 and 4 position is just. It was an issue in the San Diego Holiday Tournament, and it really reared its head again in this game. I just don't know if Iowa really has an answer amongst any of our wing forward types at that spot defensively, because I just don't think really any of them are really up for it defensively against a team like this. And they exposed us like Oklahoma and to a lesser extent Seton Hall did. But you also defensively, like, and it was mentioned numerous times on the broadcast that Iowa's screen roll defense was really a struggle. This is, again, the way Iowa guards that coverage is not different. Iowa has their center hard hedge out there because they're trying to force a point guard to retreat, trying to stop him from turning the corner, and they're trying to get active hands high, in theory, to take away that pass to roll man, but that was not happening. Iowa State was hitting that roller with consistency, and that player was able to make a layup or find another teammate maybe open who maybe was left open because Iowa rotated to try and take the roll and left someone, say, else open for a layup or a three-point shot. And those are issues that, like, if you've watched Iowa basketball enough over the last couple of years, you'll find that teams who are really committed to hitting that roller can really exploit it. And Iowa State certainly did so in this game, which is a credit to them. They know Iowa's weakness. They're very familiar with what Iowa does, and they exploited it. And I could say, on one hand, it's like, okay, our centers need to be better defensively at getting out there and having high hands and then getting back to help on the roller, getting back to their assignment. But the reality is when you have a center go out that high on a hedge, it's just a really long recovery, and it's really hard for big, slower players to get back. It's really a scheme thing to me, and it's very frustrating. And is one of those things where, like, given how like consistently Iowa is getting abused in that screen roll coverage, it's very odd that Iowa chose to wait as long as they did to really go consistently as long as they did. Because the reality is, when Iowa went to that 2-3 zone, Iowa didn't get stops like every possession, but all of a sudden, like, Iowa was actually able to find somewhat consistent stops. We were keeping the ball on the perimeter for Iowa State, and sure, they made some threes, and credit to them. But like, if you're going to play Iowa State, that's probably where you're going to give stuff up. Because a guy like Milan Momcilovic are really good shooters, and oh man, did he really show his shooting ability in this game? Even when he missed it, even when he missed his shots, his shot looks so clean. He's a really good offensive player. But like, you're willing to give up 3-point shots against Iowa State. It's preferable to giving up layups and dunks around the rim. And Iowa actually felt like was able to somewhat consistently get stops in that second half for stretches. Where in theory, like, okay, if it was in theory a closer game, Iowa would have actually had a puncher's chance maybe. But they took too long to go to the zone, and the zone wasn't perfect. But it really took too long. And in general, this is a very frustrating game when you understand what goes into coaching and strategy and whatnot. This is a very frustrating game from a decision-making standpoint from Iowa, coaching-wise. Just, quite frankly, a lot wrong. I guess I should probably start talking about the lineup change. There's two separate starting lineups in this game for the first half and the second half. In the first half, they made a change as opposed to the first couple games of the year, inserting Josh Dix into the starting lineup for Desante Bowen. So here's the thing. I like Josh. Again, going back, like, if you rewatch that Seton Hall game in particular, Josh Dix is a major reason why I was able to win that basketball game. Made numerous plays in that second half. Made shots, made plays for other people. Played good defense. He was a legitimate part of why I won that game. And I want him to be part of the rotation going forward. But you have to understand when's the right time to do things and when's the wrong time to do things. This is absolutely the wrong time to put a guy like that in as your starting point guard. Iowa State is incredibly athletic and physical guarding on the perimeter, looking to get steals, looking to bother you, just looking to make your life hell, picking you up full court, etc. This is the wrong time to be putting in a player who's starting his very first game in an in-state rivalry, which he is an Iowan. He's understands the importance of this game, so like, he's going to be feeling pressure just in terms of that. And on top of that, it's his first game starting. He's asked to be the point guard, which he's shown the ability to do at times, maybe against opponents not to the physicality or athleticism of Iowa State. But like, that's the thing. It's like, you can't throw him in that position where he's being asked to do a whole lot against like players. Like, he should not realistically be asked to like handle the ball against. Keyshawn Gilbert just took his lunch money twice in the first 4 minutes of the game. Iowa State was having Tamia Lipsey guard Tony Perkins because I think they identified Tony as somebody they really had to slow down to stop Iowa. But Gilbert was making Iowa's life hell offensively and defensively. Iowa State's best player in the game. And it's just too much to ask for a guy like Josh in his first game to go up against a defense like this with athletes like this. You're setting him up for failure. And the disappointing thing for me in terms of it is, like, again, I like Josh as a player, but what does this do to his confidence? Now, over the course of the next couple of days, all he's going to hear and all he's going to be thinking is, man, I wasn't good enough. Man, Josh Dix wasn't good enough, etc. When the reality is, he can be a key contributor to this team, but just not in the way that you were using him in this game Thursday night. And so now you plant a seed of doubt in his mind. That's just going to be something that he has to overcome. That's just, quite frankly, poor player management. Because now, like, I'm not sure where Josh is going to be at mentally going forward, where I feel like going into this game, he was probably in a good spot mentally, which is probably why, in part, why Fran wanted to play him. But at the same time, like, it's not the moment. It's just not. You're asked him to do something he shouldn't be doing. He can handle the ball to an extent, but just not as a lone point guard against a team like Iowa State. it's a recipe for disaster. And on top of that, like, okay, I can get that DeSante hasn't been like All-American, superstar, whatever caliber to start this year. Like, he's been okay. But you can't overreact to just like one game. Or whatever. So against Purdue, he only played 13 minutes and didn't make much of an impact. He was bench ridden for a good portion of the game. Excuse me. But you have to understand when stuff is like matchup based versus when it's not. Right now, what DeSante's doing really well is he's taking care of the ball. He has a good assist to turnover ratio, and he's finishing well around the rim. He's shooting 65% on shots around the rim. That's really good for a point guard. That's really good. Like, that's the kind of shooting percentage around the rim you'd expect from a center, not a 6'3" guard. So he's doing a really good job of playing physical, finishing through contact, drawing fouls, etc. But the problem against a team like Purdue is they have a 7'4" giant in there, so those shots aren't open because the dude's literally a foot taller than DeSante. So, like, that's just not a DeSante game. That's fine. Like, but you can't allow, like, just a bad matchup game for a player to, like, make you think, like, okay, all of a sudden this player's a problem. Like, no, it's just a bad matchup. Move on and just to start DeSante the next game. It's just not the right decision remotely to bench DeSante coming off of that Purdue game and coming to this Iowa State game where we needed as many guys who were capable of handling that pressure as possible. That was a poor decision. It was not smart. It's not smart player management. And again, talking about player management, now DeSante is going to be ticked like, okay, like, I'm taking care of the ball during this year. I'm finishing well around the rim. Am I limited maybe as a shooter? Sure. But the things you're probably asking me to do, manage the game, play defense, and finish around the rim, I'm doing. So, like, what do you want from me? Now DeSante's probably ticked. So where's he at mentally wise? Just poor player management, poor decision making, knowing what you had to have coming into this game against Iowa State. It was not a good lineup decision. And again, I want both of those players to have a key role going forward, but like, this is just not the way to handle this spot. And Iowa State made Iowa pay. And I guess thinking, and this is something that people will be calling for, Owen Freeman to start going forward. He started the second half in place of Josh Dix. They opted to have Tony play the point guard, or start point guard in the second half. That is very much a decision that needs to be made, and I expect it to probably be the case going forward, starting the next game against Michigan, for Owen to start. Again, going back to what I said about Peyton, defensive error in this video, we just don't have the physicality or athleticism at the 3 or 4 spots right now to guard teams who play with any amount of physicality at those forward spots. Teams will abuse us, whether they're capable of offensive rebounding against us or taking us off the bounce. Like, teams will be able to exploit our defense at the 3 and 4 spots. And while Owen, he will be playing the 5 and then move Ben Krikke, in theory, up to the 4. While that makes you a slower team, it adds to your physicality. It, in theory, improves your rebounding, because, okay, now you have 2 centers in there, I guess, along with some like maybe Paige Sanford, who's rebounding decently well against teams against similar competition, height-wise to him. It gives you more rebounding help. Owen Freeman has a block percentage right now of 13%. That's one of the tops in the Big Ten, and he was probably a little too overly aggressive trying to block shots in the second half. Like, you can tell, like, he was on a mission to just like block everything, whether it was the smart decision to try and block a shot or not. And he was fouling or not getting called for fouls he probably should have gotten called for. But he was really like F this, I'm just going to try and block everything. And to an extent, like, he's playing a little bit out of control offensively, but he's also making plays defensively. And Iowa needs somebody to protect the rim. They need someone to provide some physicality in there. And if Iowa isn't going to have good defense at the 3 and 4 spots with Pat and Peyton anyway, then, like, quite frankly, like, even if Ben isn't the best defender out there, he's too important for the offense. And Owen's important for the defense. So those two, quite frankly, need to play together. And the reality is you're going to have to bench one of either Pat or Peyton going forward to make that happen. I don't know if he's going to reinsert DeSante back in the starting line, although he should. The harsh reality is, like, you need to bench one of Pat or Peyton. Because if you start DeSante along with Tony, that gives you at least a solid athleticism in that court. And the funny thing is, like, if you really go back and watch this game against Iowa State, like, to me, it's like, the ability to guard the ball one-on-one from the guard spot, from, like, Tony or DeSante or Josh, whoever, wasn't really the problem. It's really just the ball screen coverage and the physicality of the 3 and 4 spots that really overwhelmed us. Defensively, I don't really think guards were really the problem in this game. So start DeSante and Tony. Give yourself at least maybe a solid base defensively to start the game. Start in the back. Give yourself a rim protector. And just find the other 2 best players amongst either Cricky, Peyton, or Pat to start the 3 or 4 spots. And that decision I don't think is particularly hard from a fan's perspective. It might be difficult from a father's perspective. But one thing I will say is, if you're really concerned about putting your son in the best chance to succeed, keep in mind, putting him on the bench does put him against players that, in theory, has more talent than. He might be better served coming off the bench, coming against non-starters. It would add some experience to Iowa's bench as opposed to the 4 freshmen and 1 sophomore we have right now. So you're adding some experience to the freshmen, which I think would probably be helpful for the freshmen to have an experienced hand to help guide them on the court at times. And it gives Pat more ability to score maybe off the bench against lesser competition because he's not going up against starters. That decision, quite frankly, needs to happen. And I'm not sure it's going to happen. He might just have Tony start at point guard again against Michigan Sunday night. Or it's not Sunday night, Sunday afternoon. But the reality is that's the decision that needs to be made. Pure and simple. It needs to be made. It's the best thing. And it gives Iowa the best chance to be competent defensively. Because again, if you look at the on-off stats, Owen Freeman is the most important defensive player on Iowa's team by far. And he has to get on the floor, which means one of either Pat or Peyton or Ben has to leave. And it's probably Pat that has to leave. And Owen showed his defensive capability. 3 blocks. Again, he's overly aggressive trying to block shots, but I like the fact he's at least being aggressive, at least playing hard. Again, he showed later in the game, he also again showed his ability that he's really good at like moving quickly around steals in the post to get his hands on post feeds to get a steal. He did that late in the game again. He's done that multiple times throughout the course of this year. There was one time when Gilbert was trying to attack in transition. He saw Owen in the paint and he backed off and decided to kick it out because, like, oh, I can't finish around this guy because he makes things really difficult. Like, people know he's Iowa's best defender. It's really obvious. So, and there are faults. Like, he made some mistakes in ball screen coverage. Again, I think it's a scheme thing more than a player thing, quite frankly. But, like, he's too important defensively. He has to play. He has to play. He has to start. And I get the impression Iowa's probably going to start him. The only question is who's he going to fill in for, which I am a little scared about what the answer is going to be there, quite frankly. I mean, hell, even thinking about him in the zone, there was one time where Iowa State had an after timeout play where they swung the ball all the way to the right corner, and they had Robert Jones try and seal Owen Freeman up the lane to open up that baseline drive for their player. And Owen was quick enough to get around that Robert Jones steal and still alter the shot. And it's like, that's just a naturally gifted. There's no players in Iowa who can make that play, who are athletic enough to make that play, other than Owen. He's too important defensively. He has to play. But whatever, I keep ranting. And Iowa should have gone zone sooner, which again is just, I don't think this was a very good game from a strategical standpoint from Iowa. There's a whole lot wrong here. But just thinking about, I guess, what Iowa did offensively, I think, again, the main problem is Iowa State really had us sped up. They had everyone sped up. DeSante, Josh, Tony, Brock, Peyton. You can find multiple examples of those guys just taking shots way too quick, picking up charges because they're trying to force it against a set defense, dribbling to double teams. Iowa State plays that no-middle defense where they're really trying to force you to eventually drive baseline where a double-team trap will come. And Iowa dribbled into that short corner way too many times this game. Ben Krikke in particular was guilty of like dribbling there way too many times, and he got himself in trouble. But he's not the only one. You can find examples of multiple players doing it, freshmen or experienced players doing it. But Iowa State had us controlled there. They had us sped up, and like I think the main problem that I have right now with Iowa offensively is everyone is wired to score, and no one's really thinking about like making their teammates better. Which is not to say they're selfish, but they're all scorers. Like again, Peyton Sanford's a good example. Like okay, he can shoot, he can score. He took one horrible shot in the first half where we were down 6 and he got an defense rebound and just took it all the way to the top of the key and shot a 26-footer. It's just like that is a horrible shot. But like the thing about a guy like Peyton even is like sure, like he's not like maybe a guy you want dribbling too much, but he's a guy who attracts attention because of his shooting ability. So when you have defenders flying at you on the perimeter, or when you get a guy off his feet maybe with a pump fake or whatever, sure, like look to score for yourself, but like try and find your teammates, try and find an open shot, because like when everything's 1-on-1, when everyone's just trying to score, that's when things start to feel like they're difficult because you're going up against a set defense in Iowa State that's trying to give you driving lanes only so they can trap the ball. It's really hard to play 1-on-1 against a team like this. You have to like think about making the right pass, finding the open man, making teammates better. And there's just too many moments where it's like it feels like Iowa's just like wired to score and isn't necessarily thinking about like okay, where's the open man? And even someone like DeSante, who had one of our better games from the ability to get into the lane, ability to find somebody. There was a moment in time where late in the second half when he drove and was able to beat his man off the dribble and drove into one of their bigs and drew a foul. And it's great that he drew a foul, but Price Sanford's wide open to his right. It's like, all right, like it's great that you're feeling yourself. It's great that you're able to finish around the rim. It's great that you're able to draw fouls. It's great that you're making an impact on the game in transition or whatever, but you still can't ignore your teammates because a Price Sanford wide open 3 in the corner is a high percentage shot. And it's not just like DeSante's. That's just one example I want to make note of. Because a couple possessions later, he found Josh in a similar kind of spot, open for 3. But again, like Peyton, Tony, Pat, Ben, these are the experienced guys who need to start thinking about, okay, like I'm drawing attention to the situation. I'm drawing a double team. I'm drawing the rotation, the defense towards me. Where's the open man? Iowa needs to find a calming presence who really can take hold of the offense and make the right play when it's needed. And like in theory, like maybe like Brock Harding would be that player, but I think the biggest problem right now with Brock so far in this early season is like I just don't think he's really showed much from a scoring standpoint. And I think people are probably going to start recognizing that and just start overplaying his passing angles and just letting him score. And like, so like the reality is like you need one of your players who are more capable of scoring, who have shown more scoring wise, who are capable of drawing those double teams, who are capable of drawing the defense away from their teammates. You need one of your better scorers to start thinking about making your teammates better. And that's, I think, the problem right now is everyone's wired to score and no one's really making anyone better. But that being said, the ability of someone like DeSante Bowen to get into the lane in this game really helped. There was a huge disparity in points in the paint. And that was not really about Iowa State's guards necessarily getting in the lane. It's more about their physicality, their forward spots taking over. But Iowa needs guys who can create their own shot. And DeSante, in theory, can be that guy. Like, okay, like if he can like continue to finish this well around the rim, and he can hone in on his passing ability, because he had 4 assists to 1 turnover, so it's not like it was a poor passing game. He had one play that should have been a turnover where he dribbled into traffic and threw it off of Ben Krikke's back. It wasn't a turnover, it should have been. But regardless, like he was one of Iowa's better players, and like okay, like hopefully a guy like that can start to drive, and not just drive to score, not just to drive to get fouled, but drive to find his open teammates. I think I saw that one time late in the game. I'm hoping we're going to see that consistently because Iowa needs someone to just make things easier for their other teammates. The reality is, like, there was no common presence for Iowa, and Iowa was spent up offensively all game long. Iowa was really rattled, and it showed. I don't want to say like too much because like that's just a harsh reality. And again, I'm being really negative, but one thing I think to keep in mind when it comes to this and trying to like bounce down, try and like take a deep breath and like really think about the situation. So Iowa's played 5 games so far this year where there was a realistic chance where Iowa go in and you might expect maybe Iowa could theoretically lose this game. And we're 1-4 in those games. The thing to keep in mind, I think, for Iowa going forward is we're going to be. I think the thing that bothers me the most about this early season schedule is just even if I were to lay out the 5 games Iowa's played, Creighton, Iowa State, Purdue, Seton Hall, Oklahoma, if I were to lay out all 5 of those games to most teams, and I were saying like, okay, 3 of those games are on the road against Creighton, Iowa State, and Purdue on the road, 3 of the toughest places to play in the entire country, and you have 2 neutral site games against quality competition in Oklahoma and Seton Hall. If I were to throw that scenario to like 90, to all D1 teams out there, 95+% are probably saying they're going 2-3 at best. There might be a couple teams who might be expecting to win on the road at Iowa State, Creighton, or Purdue, but that list is very small. There's a lot of teams who would go 1-4, 2-3, and 0-5 against that stretch. And Iowa's going to have home opportunities going up against the best teams in the Big Ten. There are 4 Big Ten teams currently in the net top 40, and Iowa has home games against every single one of those teams: Ohio State, Illinois, Purdue, and Wisconsin. We have home games against all 4 of those teams. So there are opportunities to pick up good wins at home going forward. But it's frustrating when you don't put out a schedule where you have a manageable home win in the non-conference. Like, Iowa really should have started. In years where we play Iowa State at Hilton, Iowa really needed to start thinking about scheduling home and homes where we get a home game against a good team in years where we go at Hilton. Because otherwise we're relying on the Gavi games to give us a home game, which we have no control over. The neutral site games we play during Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever, those are going to be neutral site. So if you don't schedule these kind of home and homes and give yourself a home game in this kind of year when you play at Iowa State, you're putting yourself in a position where you might not have many realistic opportunities to pick up good wins in non-conference. Which wouldn't hurt you if the Big Ten was a quality league and you can pick up a lot of wins in the Big Ten in terms of quad 1, quad 2, etc. in conference play. But the Big Ten's down this year. There are 4 teams with a net below 100 right now, which is much higher than it's been the last couple of years. And I don't know if Iowa's going to be able to absorb this poor non-conference showing, even if they go 11-9 in conference play. That might not be enough. And then again, that's why you give yourself more realistic opportunities in non-conference to pick up wins at home. But Iowa chose not to do that. And thus, you got 3 insanely tough road games that most people would probably lose. And it pretty much forced you to have to sweep the San Diego tournament, which you did not. But Iowa's net strength of schedule right now, if you look at the net rankings, it lists strength of schedule. Iowa's is 9th right now. And that's a product of playing a lot of tough road games and a lot of tough neutral site games against good opponents. And that's the highest in the Big Ten, believe it or not, even factoring in all the bye games Iowa's played against mid-majors. So this has been a tough schedule. But that's why it's frustrating because just too many games where it's just hard to envision you winning from a scheduling standpoint. It's frustrating. But Iowa needs to play better to get in Big Ten play because we're probably going to go 12-8 or so. to really feel good about it. I don't know for sure, but like that's probably the target I'm thinking about is 12-8. Yeah, very very frustrating, and they're gonna be looking bounce back against Michigan. I subscribe to one of their page sites, umhoops.com, mainly because I really like the guy who runs that site. I think he's a really smart guy. Um, and I don't like post there or anything, but I do read their stuff. And he posts Big Ten related stuff too, which is interesting. Which is the main reason I kind of follow that site, because I like his take on the Big Ten. But as a result of subscribing to a site like that, I get a lot of feel for Michigan basketball. It's kind of weird to hear Diet Iowa kind of thrown around kind of consistently, but Michigan fans is kind of a, and it's not necessarily maybe the exact term Diet Iowa, but there's a lot of comparisons made to Iowa the last couple of years from Michigan fans whenever I go to that site. It's like Diet Iowa, or we're playing like Iowa or whatever. What I mean by that, I'm high ranking offensively, poor defensively. That's been the trend the last couple of years for Michigan. And it's not just that. They also like to mix up their defenses. They play a lot of zone and man, which I don't think they necessarily are a fan of their fans, but it is what it is. This is kind of weird to hear, like, Diet Iowa getting thrown around by a fan base, and it's not really a positive. I think when you're talking about, like, the key players to factor in, it's very evident from when you watch Michigan and when you read their forums. Doug McDaniel is Michigan basketball. Michigan basketball is Doug McDaniel. Everything runs through him. Michigan runs a lot of ball screen coverage, or a lot of ball screen action, which makes sense. Jawan's from the NBA. It makes sense that he would build an offense based heavily around ball screen action. It's incredibly scary given the struggles Iowa's had guarding screen roll action these last couple games, that we're going to be going up against one of the most high ball screen usage teams in the entire Big Ten, against one of the more electrifying point guards in the Big Ten. He's fast as hell, Doug McDaniel. A little guy, but fast as hell. And Terrence Reed has underperformed probably in comparison to what Michigan fans were thinking coming in this year, but he's still a big physical presence. Excuse me. And if Iowa lets him get rolling to the rim and get a lot of dunks and layups, that's going to get him feeling good. That's really going to impact his defensive level, and all of a sudden he's a big physical presence. He's going to be able to take away shots at the rim if he's feeling good about himself. And that's scary. It's like, okay, like, will Iowa be able to generate good looks against a guy like that? Is it Terrence Reed, if he starts playing well, like, that kind of changes the things that Michigan could probably do defensively. I think it's probably going to be important for Iowa to play him off the floor. And their second main scorer is Olivia Kamwa. Again, another physical presence that can shoot the ball as well. For Michigan, they have a physical front line in theory, although it hasn't necessarily always played like that so far this year. But I'm really concerned again with Iowa's defense at the 3 and 4 spots. I don't know if we roll back the starting lineup with Peyton and Pat at those spots, we're not going to be able to guard someone like Olivia Kamwa, even though he is kind of inconsistent, but he is talented. And if we do decide to have Ben Cricky guard him, how is that going to work? How is Ben going to be able to guard Olivia on the perimeter? That's an interesting question to have. And again, the scary thing I think in general about a team like Michigan is they recruit well. They have a lot of talented players. They have a lot of electric scorers. So they can score with Iowa. And if this becomes a shootout, like normally against a lot of Big Ten teams, I'm not necessarily worried if it becomes a shootout because Iowa can outscore a lot of Big Ten teams in a shootout kind of defense, optional game, whatever. But against a team like this that can legitimately score with us, and that's feeling a little down upon themselves, they're below 500 for the first time in a while in Michigan. This might be the exact kind of pick-me-up that Michigan needs going up against a very poor defense in Iowa. It might be the exact kind of pickup they need to get their heads up and start playing confidently, and their talent that will shine through. And the good news for Iowa is Michigan's also very porous defensively, so this might be a pick-me-up game for Iowa in many ways. This is almost a must-win for both teams. Both teams really need to start feeling good about themselves. like have a all right, let's all breathe moment, let's all calm down moment. So like this is really a must win for both teams, honestly. Um, just from a pure confidence standpoint. And I think it's going to be a shootout. And like I just really hope that Iowa is ready for it because I'm a little scared because I don't know if we have an answer for Conwell. We definitely don't have an answer for Doug McDaniel because he is electric. Um, and while the rest of their team I don't think is super outstanding, I'm worried about someone like Terrace Reed finding himself in this kind of game and his physicality, again, overwhelming us at times. Um, like you saw in this Iowa State game. So I think it's really a game I'm not sure what to expect other than a lot of points. And I just hope that Iowa finds themselves in this game and can find a bounce back game because we are going to need a bounce back game desperately. But anyway, there's not much more that needs to be said. I'll see y'all either Sunday night or Monday.